Good morning. Thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to thank our administration, our staff, our Board of Ed, and most importantly you guys, the junior class. He walked continually in the shadows, groping darkly within his own soul. Nathaniel Hartborn, the minister's black veil. From the very introduction of the Student Press Initiative, we struggled to decide upon a theme for our story. This year, we were hit by many social changes and conflict. We were searching to find a place, and it was difficult to find a common one, a common idea. It would cover a common idea that would cover each of our individual stories. We began this year interacting with texts and interviewing our community. We gathered ideas about the American identity. We focused on one question: what does it mean to be an American? We interviewed friends, relatives, mentors, and strangers. We examined historical documents, speeches, lyrics, poems, and various genres of fiction. And we even compared modern and historical perspectives in America. As we engaged with subject matter and searched for ideas with each other, we began to hit a curtain. We couldn't find a common idea. We concluded that the American identity is not fixed. We asserted that Americans continually attempt to realize the image portrayed in the Founding Fathers' documents. We are people that are sometimes unjust, yet we strive for justice. We are people who combat, yet we fight for peace. We are individuals, yet we struggle for unity. As the year progressed, we engaged with writing, listening, and reading personal narratives. This idea of a continually emerging identity persisted itself within the subject and conversations. Finally, in early January, after writing several seed pieces to various related topics, we decided upon the theme of identity, and the image of a veil came to us. The title of the Hoboken High School's junior class memoir, Beyond the Veil, was inspired by Nathaniel Hartborn's short story, The Minister's Black Veil. Today, I'm excited to share with you, everyone, our stories that we have today. So first off, I'd like to call up Hannah Mack, reading her story, Seeing.
It was a bright, sunny Sunday, my last day at camp. I had spent my last night laughing and crying in beams of firelight with all my counselors and friends. Normally, at the end of camp, my dad would pick me up. But this time, my mom scheduled a flight for me. It was the first summer I was not spending at my dad's house, and I thought I wasn't going to see him. But nothing is ever that easy with him. That summer was the year my sister Olivia joined me at camp. I love all my little sisters, all 4 of them. But I love Olivia the most, which contributed to this complicated situation. My sister was getting picked up by my dad. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was packing when I heard my oldest sister's voice. I quickly grabbed what I could and ran out of my cabin. I panicked. I had a 20-pound hiking backpack strapped to my back, and I ran as if something were chasing me. Metaphorically, something was. In the midst of my panic, I heard Olivia calling me, Hannah, wait. My heart felt like it was ripped from my chest. She brought my stepsister to see me? Was I now running away from her? I couldn't stop. I couldn't think. I was crying. I couldn't face my dad, and now I couldn't face my sister Olivia too. I ran past the rock wall and the cabins, and finally I reached the makeshift beach. The lapping of the water calmed me down as the sand filled my sneakers. I thought it was clear, but then I heard my dad's laugh. It was like a bullet to my back, but it just grazed my shoulder. I fled to the main building where all the other happy families were being reunited. I walked into the office, and the camp director was there, and she already was briefed on my situation. She reassured me that I would not have to see him and that I was to leave in 15 minutes. I kept checking my phone through each passing minute, and then I heard his voice through the office wall. I ran to the bathroom. Was this a game for him? Why does he want to see me hurt? I felt like a small mouse, and he was the exterminator. Eventually, it was time to go, and all I had to do was get to the car that would take me to the airport. This should have been easy, but my life is never easy. My counselor knocked on the bathroom door. "Hannah, it's time to go." I made it safely to the van, and then I heard the sound of sneakers on gravel and my oldest sister's face staring through the window. They were all outside. I didn't look up. I wanted to leave and have this day over with. And then I heard Olivia crying, and my heart melted. I didn't want to leave the van, but I couldn't leave her there. She didn't understand the situation. So I took a deep breath, and I stepped out of the van and ran right to her. I hugged her really hard, and I told her how sorry I was. She saw I was crying too. "You should go talk to your dad. He misses you. What you're doing isn't smart," my stepmother uttered. I didn't want to see him, let alone talk to him. He was behind the side mirror of the van. He was hiding. I couldn't remember the last time I saw him before that moment. I didn't even look at his face. I just walked over, gave him this side hug, and turned right around and stepped into the van. I never returned to camp after that. And it still stings knowing how much I missed out because of that one moment. It had me take a sledgehammer to the pedestal that I put my father on. If you were to ask me, "Who is your father?" I would say my mother. My mother has always been both father and mother to me, and I think she feels guilty about my pain caused by all my father's broken promises. But then she would remind me, if it wasn't for him, I would have never had you. She never fails to make me feel better. As I grow up, our relationship becomes stronger. She isn't just my mother. She's my best friend. She raised me to be polite. She raised me to be kind. She raised me to be brave. She raised me. She never cared if I got good grades or passed my SAT and ACT or got on a roll. All she expected to do was do my best. And that's what I do. I do my best. Not just for me, but for my mom as well, to make her proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was a beautiful story. I'd now like to call up Brianna Rivera reading her story, A Brooklyn Tale.
I always loved the train rides to my grandmother's apartment in Brooklyn. The train on the tracks, the way the subway air hit my face as it passed, and the cold breeze that smelled of mildew and newspapers. I would take the train ride on Fridays and stay until Sunday. My grandmother lived just off Church Ave, so the ride was pretty long, about 26 stops from 14th. I loved it mostly because of New York, lots of brown brick buildings with fire escapes and roofs covered in graffiti. I always been fascinated with the look of graffiti. Each person who tagged the name had either a love of art or wanted some recognition. My favorite corner store was a block away from our house. On its drop-down gate was painted an image of the Puerto Rican flag, and next to that, the face of my aunt's brother-in-law, Henry, who passed away of a drug overdose. It was my favorite part of the block because just like every art piece in New York, it had a story. When I got to my grandmother's building, I would ring the bell the same way every time. Each family member had their own ring, which is how she knew who was at the door. She lives on the second floor. The first floor had a back door that always creeped me out. It was dark, so I would run up the stairs, skipping steps. Inside, my grandma would be sitting on the couch, her legs crossed, and she would say what every Puerto Rican would say. ¿Cómo tú estás? Take your shoes off, I just mopped. And then she hugged me, and I would be surrounded by the smell of her Egyptian musk. White translucent curtains hung from every open window. My favorite window was the one near my Uncle Felix's bed. Looking out, you could see houses that came around in a circle. In the middle, there were abandoned chairs and tires and other garbage poking out from long grass. It literally looked like a jungle. Grandma would lower a pot from her window and feed runaway cats that lived back there. On Friday, Grandma would cook and I would watch TV with Felix or trade comic books. He's my youngest uncle, so he's like an older brother to me. When it's time for bed, I would sleep with my grandma. We would watch her Spanish soap operas and then a marathon of Law and Order. She would ask me to brush her hair with an orange comb she kept under her pillow. It's funny, she always had her handy things. The butter knife she used to bang the pipes when the upstairs neighbors were too loud was in a shoe on the rack next to the heater. In the couch, she kept tissues and a bunch of bliss sticks that she would put on her fingers because the mint helped the pain in her hands. Saturdays were my favorite. I would wake to the sound of Grandma's chancletas as she walked over to the stereo to put Motown music. She would play some of my favorite groups like the Four Tops, the Shy Lights, the Jackson 5, and the Temptations. I knew every one of those songs by heart. We would listen all day while Grandma mopped with baby-scented Miss Stoline. Then my sister and I would draw up her pictures and play with Barbies in the hallway. When Grandma was done cleaning, she would burn frankincense. It's a woody aroma that would linger all day. Later, we'd stop at the corner store to buy snacks for our walk to the park. My uncle would bring a skateboard or bike or handball after we would sit on the steps of her building. Because Grandma liked being outside at night, when Sunday morning came, I would be in tears because I knew I had to go back home. On the ride back, I would reminisce about the weekend and plan my next trip. Years passed and we continued to have Friday trips to New York, but Grandma's energy was slowly fading. She hardly had energy to go out for walks and make trips to Food Town, so we would go alone. She wouldn't feed the cats no more. To be honest, if it wasn't for the Motown music and incense smell, it wouldn't have felt the same as the old days. Everyone knew Grandma had health problems, but we didn't realize how serious they were until she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. That year we spent Christmas break and New Year's with her. That was the worst visit. There was no music, no incense, not even the usual welcome. Grandma couldn't leave her bed. The ride home wasn't the same. She passed away on March 9th.
Thank you, Brianna. Lovely story. I'd now like to call up Martin Perez, reading his story, Courage on the Trail.
The swish of wind and constant sound of honking distracted me for a moment from the clamor of my friends. My stomach cramped as I thought of the possibility of police sirens and handcuffs. Go, hurry, up, go. Fragments of my friends' voices pierced through the horns and whistling filled the bridge. I ran towards them down the narrow sidewalk. With each step, their voices became clearer. There we stood in front of the old rusted brown tinted gate, an army of young 8th graders preparing to enter another world, compelled by what lies on the other side. The light's red. There's no cars, shouted Miguel. Wait, we don't even know who the hell is going to go in first or where to go, Jose shouted. True, and what about the cops, asked Miguel. Another voice added, and my aunt might drive up here. She might see us. My head began to spin, and my stomach cramped again. The possibilities of getting hurt, caught, and in trouble filled my mind. We were no longer safe. Who was going to help us now? Abandoned by our own friends, the friends that pledged to have each other's backs, and then there they were, walking up the narrow sidewalk away from us. Cowards, I said to myself. Come on, we have to hurry. The light's about to go green, I shouted. 2 of my friends held the sides of the rusted gate. It widened and stretched like a mouth getting ready to devour one of us. We stared at the gate, and for a moment the silence grew, and the light slowly turned green. Screw it, I don't want to get caught. I leaped right into the gate. My sweater pocket snagged on its jagged and rusty teeth. We thought the hardest part would be getting in, but the reality was we didn't know what to expect later on. I squinted. As I crouched on the wet dirt, the field was scattered with recycled papers and beer cans. I planned our next move when I spotted a white rope dangling from the trees along the hill. We could use that to stay on our feet. As we made our way down the hill, Martin, move over, we're coming in, Anthony shouted. Of course he was the second. Anthony was the type of kid who really didn't care about what we were doing. He just wanted to have fun. I was happy he was with us. We didn't talk much after the 7th grade, but I remember every day we'd bust out laughing while making jokes about our teachers. Soon, I felt like I was in the 7th grade again. My stomach cramps disappeared, and the first thing we did, of course, was laugh. Is that it? Anthony said. I don't know, but I know I'm not stepping on it. I bet you Reuben will, I replied. Reuben was the third to enter. His gray sweatpants snagged to the dirty floor, and his eyes widened when he crouched and saw the landscape littered with filthy aluminum cans. Martin, what did I step on, he asked, lifting up his white sneaker. I can remember seeing the priceless expression on his face that said, oh my God, my mom's gonna kill me. Anthony and I laughed. Reuben was always a clumsy one. The clumsy one, something always had to happen to him. Told you he was going to step on it. I glanced at Anthony. Oh man, what am I going to do now? Reuben looked at me and Anthony. Yet again his eyes widened as he jolted his hands aggressively on his neck and cracked it. There was a loud crunch and then a look of relief on his face. It was certainly one of those moments where you say, what the hell just happened? Yet this wasn't the first nor the last time he did it in front of us. Now normally I would laugh in his face about his unusual habit, but I didn't want him to get too embarrassed and scurry back up the hill and leave. The thing was, with him, I wasn't the only one scared about the craziness of adventuring into this. So I felt even more comfortable. Next came James, who stood tall and proud, the leader of the maddening, legendary idea, who on one faithful day in the school cafeteria, as the kids at our table threw pieces of old stale bread across the lunchroom and eventually ended up getting caught by a substitute, preached about the adventures of what he called the Project Hills, a land that is untouched by anyone and was bigger than the most notable hideout at the time in Hoboken called Narnia. We all imagined building a fort, chilling under the trees, where we couldn't be bothered by cops or yuppies that passed by, expressing their sympathy for our safety. You could say his words were pretty persuasive for us, and like anything else, we said screw it, and it landed us here. Next came Sessa, his long hair covering his left eye, while his right eye widened, observing what was ahead of us. Without a doubt, Sessa was nervous. Usually he would talk and say jokes, but not now. He just wanted to get over with, which was understandable. Then CJ, who was nervous, but you could tell his adrenaline was rushing to fight if something happened. Finally, Joe, the oldest, and Jose. Ann and I were the first to advance down the hill. We held on to the unstable rope that was attached to the trees that proceeded down the hill. We tugged and pulled the rope as we tried to keep our balance. Calluses on my hands began to rip apart and burn in the cool air. Hold up, what was that? James whispered. They crouched against the dark, thick green bushes, while the rest of us hid behind a massive boulder. The group was silent. I looked up and took note of the beauty of it all. The trees swayed in the breeze, and I listened to the crickets chirping and the hum of gnats over my head. For a moment, I felt like I was somewhere far, far away from Hoboken. I've seen beauty in my town, the view from Pier C, when the lights from the modern skyscrapers shimmered across the Hudson. Yet this felt different for some reason. I felt like I was in a place that could build memories that would last forever. Whatever happened didn't matter, because we were together. That was it.
Thank you, Martin. I'd now like to call up Andrew Moyer reading his story, Inspired to Create.
Colors, lines, shapes, and figures, running in constant motion like gears on an assembly line, moving for the creation of something great. I sometimes get jolts of creativity that run down my spine and make me want to pick up a pencil and start drawing. My subconscious takes control, and I start to move my hand around a paper, similar to the way a figure skater moves on ice. My hand moves in circles, angles, curves, and expressions in life. I want to tell a story through my drawings. I want to learn the best way to do that. And the best way to do that is by becoming an animator. You could say it started when I was a baby. Now, I don't remember this for myself, but my grandmother would tell me that when I was an infant, I would grab a pencil and start scribbling. She said I would hold the pencil the way a grown man would, and that I would scribble with a purpose. Most babies carelessly grab a pencil with a whole fist and just move it all over the place like a vagrant aimlessly wandering. But not me. I made lines and curves without fully understanding what they were. I made edges and crossed angles with intention. I made art, even from a young age. I continued to draw as I got older. I worked on drawing cars and animals and people in my leisure time. Creating art was something I was certain I wanted to do, so I aspired to be an artist. Everyone had the same reaction when I told them. They would all say, "That isn't a real job," or "That's more of a hobby," or ask me to consider a more realistic career. Despite all the negativity, I kept my head dead set on being an artist, drawing for a living, because there was nothing else I liked to do more. The idea stuck with me until I was at a family gathering. I was about 10 years old when my uncle asked me, "Now what is it you want to do when you get older?" I responded the way I always do. "I want to be an artist when I grow up." He looked shocked. "You gotta do something that'll actually make you money, like a doctor or a lawyer, because let me be honest with you, being an artist is gay. You understand?" I looked up at my uncle, and I respected him more than any other man. And for him to say this about my future profession really dampened things. I compliantly responded, "Yeah, I understand," and the conversation was over. I started thinking about other possible jobs that might interest me, but I couldn't come up with anything that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I changed my future title from artist to I don't know. I stopped drawing because it wouldn't do me any good in the future. I was lost until one day I was watching a movie on Netflix I came across. It was a film called Walt Before Mickey, and it started with Disney as a kid drawing on the walls of his father's barn. The movie continues showing the development of a kid who loved to draw into a man who made a living from drawing cartoons of a mouse and his friends. I saw myself in a young Walt Disney. He was scorned for drawing and told he wouldn't get far in life. He was rejected, criticized, and set off on his own and made a living by becoming an animator. I was inspired, and I started looking up what it was like to be an animator in today's day and age, and I started to draw again. I remember sitting down at my grandfather's desk with a pen. I slid my hand across the paper, the way I did when I still had aspirations of being an artist. I made lines and little circles and textures, and I drew whatever came to mind. When I was done, I looked down and I thought to myself, this is the greatest thing I've ever made. Now I draw every day in hopes that one day I'll be good enough to create my own television show or movie for a company and have the world see my drawings. I hope one day that I'll be able to have my own works compared to Disney or watched instead they're just as good. He inspired me to do what I love, and because of that, I'm not confused with what to do. The signs were there from the beginning. What I was meant to be, what I'm supposed to be. I just need something to show me. I'm going to try to become an animator.
Thank you, Andrew. Now before I call up Demira, I'd just like to ask you guys, if you cannot control yourself, please exit the auditorium. Thank you. Demira Davenport will now come up and read her story entitled Wave.
We had just returned from celebrating my 16th birthday, and my mom and I were in a light mood. My parents took me to Outback for dinner and afterwards to see The Big Friendly Giant. It was my first time at a theater that had reclining seats. They were so comfortable that both my parents fell asleep. There was a low creak as I sat on the edge of my mother's bed, and the meteorologist on News 12 was giving the weekly forecast. I watched as my mother took off her sweater, put away her jewelry, and pulled on her favorite nightgown. It's gray with 2 pigs on it, one in all blue and one in pink, both wearing a dress and a hat decorated with a flower on top. My mom has had that nightgown since I was a baby. It's stretched, faded, and has a tiny hole in the front, but she loves it and all of its imperfections. Demira, my mom's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Oh, sorry. Did you have a good time? She asked, slightly annoyed. Of course I did. I had a lot of fun with you guys, I beamed. I fell asleep not too far in the movie. Yeah, I noticed, I laughed. What part did you get up to? I got to that part where the giant was reading to the little girl. I told her the rest of the movie. As I got up to say goodnight, I noticed a shift in my mom's mood. She was taking her medicine and began to sink into herself. I thought, maybe she's just tired. But then she said, "Listen, tomorrow I need to talk to you about something. I don't want to tell you now because it's still your birthday and I don't want to upset you." "Is it about what Dad told me about you being sick?" I asked. "Yeah." "Is it deadly?" "It could be." "Do you have cancer?" "Yeah." Could you imagine hearing that from your mother? First you try to process it, then your heart slams against your ribcage and crumbles. I felt like a surfer in a huge wave of sorrow, and then the grief engulfed me, like a wave engulfs the fallen surfer. I felt helpless. It just hurt, and all I could do was cry. I felt like no matter how many tears I shed, it would never be enough. Then my sorrow turned to anger. Anger at the world, at God. Angry that bad things happen to good people. Angry that sickness even exists. Then my fury translates into more tears. My mom tried her best to comfort me, but I was too upset to be consoled. It's pretty ironic, actually. I was being hysterical, but my mom was the one with cancer. I guess that's just what happens when you care for someone so much. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I thought about was my mom. I was still upset about the situation, but I didn't feel like crying and I wasn't angry. I realized that I needed to be there for my mom. She couldn't hold it together for me when she's the one who is sick. She needed a shoulder to cry on and someone to be her strength. Since that night, I never cried about it again. There are days when it's rough for my mom, as the side effects of the medicine take their toll. It's hard to see my mom in pain. Seeing your mom cry has got to be the worst thing in the world. Fortunately, those days are behind us and my mom is facing better days. Things are currently playing out in my mom's favor, and hopefully they'll stay that way until the end. My mom has breast cancer and it hasn't spread, and the medicine hasn't affected her in any other way than the side effects would. She has one more round of chemotherapy, then she starts radiation for 30 days, and afterwards a different treatment for once a week for 1 year, which will be much easier to endure than the chemo. The doctors found the cancer early, which is why things are running so smoothly and so quickly. It's only been a few months since all this began, but this experience taught me something crucial. It taught me to never take my life and my loved ones for granted, as cliche as that sounds. People tend to disregard the fact that nothing is guaranteed, that in the blink of an eye, anything can happen. Going through this journey with my mom has truly opened my eyes and caused me to become so much more appreciative of her. Thank you.
Thank you, Demira. Truly beautiful story. Now I'd like to call up Hannah Mack, accompanied by Edward Lepre, singing "Till It Happens to You" by Lady Gaga.
You tell me it gets better in time. You tell me pull yourself together, pull it together, you'll be fine. Tell me how the hell could you know, how could you know? Tell me how the hell can you know, how can you know? Till it happens to you, you won't know how it feels, how it feels. Till it happens to you, you won't know, it won't be real. No, it won't be real. Won't know how I feel. You tell me hold your head up and be strong. 'Cause when you fall, you gotta get up and move on. Tell me how the hell can you talk, how can you talk? 'Cause until you walk where I walk, it's just no joke. Till it happens to you, you won't know how it feels, how it feels. Till it happens to you, you won't know. happens to you, you won't know how I feel.
Thank you guys both. Beautiful, beautiful song. Now getting back into the memoirs, I'd like to call up Jonathan Canales reading his story, The 27th Floor.
The dance took place in a large, dimly lit room. It looked like the type of place you would see in a horror movie. The room was so wide, it seemed like it was never ending, with chairs stacked against the walls, wide glass windows showing the beauty of the city, unattainable from the inside. The first thing you noticed when you entered the room was the empty feeling it gave off. The dim lights, the large wooden stage that seemed to never have been used, making this room the perfect place for the horror that would occur at this evening's dance. Later that night, the room would be inhabited by hundreds of teens, twisting and turning their bodies in the most disturbing ways possible. It almost looked as though they had no bones in their bodies. Even though the room was full, it still gave off the eerie feeling from earlier in the day. Except now it was plagued with the horror of dancing. I clearly couldn't compete and decided to leave in favor of returning to my room for some peace and quiet. I snuck outside, escaping the dance in a haze of discomfort. After waiting for what seemed like an eternity, I went back inside to the elevators. Pushing the elevator button, the door quickly opened. Zombie-like, I slowly entered the elevator. To my disappointment, I would not be alone. 4 girls, all around 17, entered behind me. They were loud, giving me a serious headache with all the nonsense they were spewing. I pushed the button for the 7th floor, hoping to get back to my room and sleep this horrific night off. Unfortunately, it seemed as though this night still had enough strength to hit me in the gut one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I began to wonder why the elevator refused to go beyond the 6th floor. All I needed was one more number to get rid of myself of this disastrous night. Much to my dismay, it seemed as though the elevator was stuck. Without missing a beat, the girls began to whine and complain. I replied as calmly as I could, "Calm down, everything is going to be fine." The employees of the hotel had told us that this has happened many times and everything is usually fine. However, this occurrence felt different. After a while, something finally happened. However, instead of going up as intended, we ended up going to the lobby. In what seemed like seconds, the elevator door opened to the lobby to reveal the maintenance crew and the employees of the hotel, worried and scared. However, everything was fine now, and realizing that I would not enjoy taking the elevator again, I decided to go to my room by the stairs. Midway going to my room, I decided that I should check out the view. 728 steps later, I reached the 27th floor. Each step I took felt like I was moving heaven and earth. Despite my exhaustion and overall disgust at the evening, I couldn't help but admire the view. It was out of this world. I never would have guessed at the end of such a journey there'd be such an amazing payoff. Maybe this evening wasn't such a total failure after all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now I'd like to call up Kianna Lynn Santiago, reading her piece entitled Admittance of Addiction.
I finally got home and I couldn't have been more excited to start Thanksgiving break. I turned the key to my apartment door and took a full scan of my surroundings. My mom had put up our warm-toned fall decor, and my dad had the turkey roasting in the oven. Thanksgiving was truly in the air. But on this Thanksgiving Eve, my family went through a whirlwind of emotions. It started on a routine Wednesday that consisted of a day at school, followed by a nap and a night of TV in the living room. But my night was anything but ordinary. When I woke up from my nap, I walked into the living room and noticed that I was alone. But was I really? I could hear muffled voices, and I realized that my parents were in the hallway arguing. My mom's yells reversed the roles of my parents, as she became bigger than my father. It wasn't unusual for my parents to bicker, but this time it was different. It was way more serious than any petty argument. I couldn't make out all the words being shouted, but I could hear a few words that stung and left a mark on me afterwards. Hearing these words out of context made my head spin, and it just had felt like my world was crashing down. In my mind, I assumed the worst. My most prominent thought was, I cannot be a part of a broken household. I never imagined I would be the child that came from a home with family issues. As selfish as it may seem, this was the only thought that raced through my mind. I never heard the whole story, but from the words I did hear, I knew something was wrong, and my mom, dad, younger sister, and I were all going to be affected. The first thing I thought to do was to call my parents. Maybe I was still groggy from my nap and mistook these voices in the hall for my parents. I decided I was a little worked up, and instead of assuming the worst, I needed to calm down. I turned on my TV and watched the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. A million thoughts ran through my mind. I remember watching the movie and feeling like Charlie Brown himself. He goes for the kickoff and thinks someone he trusted like Lucy will be there for him, but he's left upside down with his world around him. I was Charlie Brown because I trusted my father, and what I had heard left my world in shambles. I fell back asleep and woke up late to the sound of my parents and sister coming through the front door. A lot had gone down while I was asleep, and as they stepped inside, I knew it was time to confront my parents. What really told me that was something wrong was the way my parents' eyes were bloodshot and puffy. They had to have been crying. The truth needed to come out, but how do you go about asking your dad, the most important man in your life, your first love, how he screwed over his family? Coming to terms with this reality was something I knew was going to be a problem, but it had to be done. When I stepped out of my room, I automatically felt the mood around me shift. Making my short journey to my parents' room, I lingered on each footstep. When I stepped into that room, my whole life changed. I sat down on my parents' bed and looked them both in their bloodshot eyes. I let them know what I had heard in the hallway and asked for an explanation. That's when these few minuscule words made all the difference, and my dad said, "Girls, I have a confession. I am an addict." My dad was in the early stages of alcoholism and addiction, and this disease was destroying my parents' marriage, our family's financial stability, and our trust. My dad comes from a mother who was a drug addict, and my dad had been experiencing difficulty and decided to turn to substances. He was a fully functional addict, but this was only the beginning of his battle with substance abuse. My mom, sister, and I, after hearing these words, knew it was the end of a lot of things, but it wasn't the end of our family. We understood this was a disease that my father had, and up until then, he was just recently suppressing his urges to feel high and hide from his problems. This never changed the fact that my man was the father he is. My father was the man he is, because he was still the man who came to support me at every sporting event and theater performance, who was my chauffeur and my chef, but most importantly, a loving father and husband. From that point on, we had to pick up the pieces of the mess my father made. But to this very day, we are still affected by his ways. But above all things, this disease has made my family stronger and more close-knit. Thank you.
Thank you, Kianna. Beautiful story. I'd now like to call up Ashley Mendoza reading her piece entitled, Our First Game Together.
Okay, so tires screeched as people scurried to get home from their jobs. Andrea and Sydney chattered loudly. There was commotion everywhere. The sun beamed down on our backs and the aroma of hot dogs filled our nostrils. Sydney walked in front of us and then suddenly turned and sang, I Need a One Dance. We snapped out of our own little world and stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and in one voice sang, I Need a One Dance. The music blared from the hot dog apart, and the lacrosse game flew out of our brains. "Come on, we're gonna be late," Tiara called from 20 feet away, reminding us that the lacrosse game was coming up. I huffed and rolled my eyes as Sydney and Andrea and I tried to catch up. I looked at the clock that was on the Snack and Burger luncheonette. The piercing bright sun almost blinding me. 4:37, the clock read. "It's 20 minutes until the game starts," I groaned as I trudged behind her, dragging my feet. "Okay, and I still want to get there early to warm up," Tiara shot back, taking me by surprise at how tense she was as we crossed the street on a green light. In 20 minutes, we would go against a team that had more experience and was better than us, so it was understandable that Tiara was anxious. "Hey, what's your problem? Are you okay?" Andrea pushed me playfully with a smirk on her face. She pulled me out of my thoughts. "I just feel like we're going to make a fool of ourselves," I exploded as I let my arms fall to each side of me. "Don't think like that. We're going to do great. We practiced a lot. We are ready," Andrea consoled my arms. Her positivity was needed, but it didn't do much to change my negative thoughts. There was nothing new about me being nervous. The scent of grass became more familiar the closer we came to the fields. "Everything is going to be fine," Andrea muttered as she spotted the Tenafly girls practicing in the distance. Rays of sun attacked our eyes as we walked out of the neighborhood and the shadowy trees towards the field. "Ashley is right. This is crazy. Everyone's gonna be there, and we're gonna make a fool of ourselves. Everyone is gonna laugh at us," Tiara agreed, sighing. "It's our first game. I'm sure we're gonna be okay. Stop thinking so negative," Sydney reassured us as we looked over to Andrea. Both were thinking the same thing. We were silent for the remaining part of the walk to the fields, only the pitter-patter of our flip-flops hitting the concrete and the honking horns of cars. Coach Denai's whistle became more prominent as we climbed the steps to the fields. "All right, ladies, warm up in 5 minutes." We were welcomed with the sea of red and white. We plopped our bags down on the field and slid our gear on while we gulped water down our throats. We all knew the routine: face each other and stretch. Andrea's eyes darted towards the Tenafly girls who pounced around the field, yearning for the ball. Tiara's breath quivered, chomping on her nails. "Girls, come on, we're going to take a picture with the Tenafly girls." Coach Denai walked over to us, squealing like a little girl. Her jet black hair bouncing up and down, her olive skin gleamed. The enthusiasm I had before drained from my body. A frown crept upon my face. My palms grew clammy. I chewed the inside of my mouth as I jumped from my spot, following my teammate Sydney. The granola bar that I'd eaten was starting to stir in my stomach, and my knees felt like spaghetti. Tiara's beach blonde hair stood up from the crowd, and before I knew it, she grabbed my hand and pulled me to the front of the crowd. Tiara put her arm around my shoulder and twisted her ponytail in between her fingers. A huge smile was plastered on her face. The Tenafly girls stood with straight faces, standing proud and tall. "See lacrosse on 3, the photographer gave a thumbs up, smiling from ear to ear. The cold blew against our faces, making our teeth chatter and our bare legs quivered against the wind. The referee blew the whistle. "All right, girls, lacrosse on 3, Tiara yelled, and the Hoboken High girls gathered around in a circle, raising our sticks to form a teepee. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Ashley. Reading Motherly Love, I would now like to call up Samantha Champion.
She was supposed to be there through my boy troubles. She was supposed to teach me the ropes about how to be a young woman. She left me. She never came back. There was a time when I felt that I needed my mom. I remember when I was in the 4th grade, we had to bring a picture of ourselves to school. She was in the picture. I sat in the classroom and looked at the picture. I wondered, why did someone left me? Why didn't she want me? I wondered, how could she have 4 beautiful children and not think to come back? She lost out on something. She missed 11 going on 12 of my birthdays. She wasn't at my Sweet 16. She didn't receive a dedication candle. She didn't help me pick out my Sweet 16 dress. She didn't go with me to get my nails or my hair done. She didn't help me set up. She didn't even say happy birthday. It's not like she doesn't know where I live. I lived in the same house for 14 years. Has she come and visit me? No, she hasn't. She has other children that she gives her full attention to. She doesn't want us, so why have us? Why put us through so much? Watching other kids receive love from their mother hurts. It really hurts. Even today, as a 17-year-old, I still feel pain. I still wonder if she's going to come through the door. I still have hope. But the question is, should I have hope should I think she's ever going to reach out to us? In reality, I feel like there shouldn't be hope. My mother hurt me in the worst way possible. But I have to forgive her, because if not, I'll be hurt for the rest of my life, and I won't move on from my past. God says we have to forgive others in order to forgive ourselves. I forgave her. And I know I shouldn't, but honestly, it's better for me. If I was to keep all this hate inside, I would hurt myself more than I would be hurting her. There's so many memories that I can go back and talk about. As I reminisce, I look at the past and realize that the person I am today is because of my troubled past. At this time, I'm still growing, and I'm becoming a responsible young woman. Honestly, I just want to thank her. I want to thank her because if it wasn't for her, I don't think I'd be so independent or focused on having a better life. I just want her to know that yes, I still hurt, but trust me, I'm getting over it. April 30th, 2016, the day I realized my life completely changed. I dedicated 16 candles to the most important people in my life. My mom wasn't one of them. I looked around and realized that all the people who I dedicated a candle to were all people who supported me through the bad times. Mom, if you ever read this, I want you to know something. I want you to know I figured that my life would be great with or without you. I'm going to graduate high school and college without the motivation from you. Either way, I'm still here.
Thank you, Samantha. Reading my number one boy, I'd now like to call up my Tahiches.
It was September 7th, 2007, my first day of second grade. My mother woke me up and rushed me to school. I was so tired, yet excited. Outside, the autumn wind hit my face, making my eyes tear. My stepdad, at the time, Victor, was driving me super fast to school so I wouldn't be late. I could tell he was excited by the way he was driving and in his facial expressions. He was ready for the arrival of my little brother, Aiden. I walked into school wearing the biggest smile, just knowing my little brother would soon be here after waiting 9 whole long months. I would finally be a big sister to a boy. Growing up, I always craved attention. Usually, I received it in the form of negative attention. I had the worst attitude. I disrupted the classes, fought with other students, and sometimes teachers, but that day, I smiled and said hi to everyone who crossed my path. I was so ready for the last bell to ring that I didn't even eat lunch. I wasn't even hungry for food. I was hungry for babysat. Finally, Abuela picked me up from school and drove me to Hackensack Hospital. As we parked the car, I already had my hand on the door handle, ready to sprint to my little brother. As soon as my grandmother put the car in park, I jumped out and said, "Abuela, come on. Aiden me estás esperando." She laughed and held my hand as we crossed the street. When we walked into the hospital, I had all my little teeth out. We walked through the halls of the building, and I could almost taste the latex and rubber from the gloves. We finally arrived at my mom's suite, and I rushed to her asking, "Where's Aiden?" She said he was in the nursery with all the other newborns, and then she directed me and my grandmother to him. After a few weeks of being home and obsessing over him, I slowly began to become his mother. Imagine at the age of 7, having to tend to a newborn, all alone, with no assistance, having to keep in how you feel because you don't want to disappoint your mother. I had to skip a childhood of fun and become an adult. Having children doesn't come with a manual. That's definitely true. I had no clue what to do once he began to cry or when he was supposed to eat or sleep. It was so overwhelming. Now I'm 17 and a junior in high school with a job, and I'm still the mother of a child I never had. I still wonder how to set good examples for him. I look at him and I see me. I see the creation I had to build. All he knows is me. As I grow up and realize that eventually I will have to leave him when I go to college, my heart slowly shatters. I know he'll be with my mom and stepdad, but I don't believe there's anyone in this world willing to love him the way I have. No matter his attitude and bad days, I am his sister, and I was I will forever be there for him. I never knew love until I held him. I couldn't imagine I would love him this much when he was in my mother's stomach. I actually felt bad when I had my first boyfriend. I prioritized him and forgot who really meant the world to me. I want to dedicate this memoir to a very special boy, a boy who has always given me the best of both worlds. Aiden, you are and always will be the most precious little boy. I know you are only 9, but you've gone through a lot too. I'm very proud of the boy you are forming into. You know you can always count on me for whatever. Since the day you were born, you have been my #1 boy. Eventually, I'll be off to college and I'm super duper excited. If I cry, it's because I have to leave you. Continue to be the greatest kid ever. Play every sport and rock out. Your big sister, Maite.
Thank you, Maite. Our next story is titled I Am by Haley Rosario.
The reflection in the mirror that I stared into showed an image of a little girl whom I could not recognize. She had her hair perm braided with colorful hair clips and was wearing a pink dress. As my eyes focused, I started to see me. My hands were above my head as if I were about to do a jumping jack. I heard a knock at the door. It was my grandmother. "Haley, can I come in?" "Sure, just close the door behind you." I heard the squeak and the click of the door as it shut. My grandmother approached me with a large object in her hand, covered by a large piece of plastic. She placed this large bag on the bed and unzipped it. The plastic bag peeled away to reveal a long, silk pink dress. I stared at it with disgust. "You want me to wear that?" "Yes, we have to look nice for the party." "Grandma, you're not serious. This is disgusting. Just look at it." "I spent a lot of money. I want you to wear it. Case closed." She walked out of the room and slammed the door. I stood over the dress staring at it. I went to my mirror and started to slick my hair back into a high ponytail. I stared in the mirror and stopped. What am I doing? I asked myself. I placed the comb down on the dresser and I gazed at myself. I felt the veins bulging on the sides of my head and a tear rolled down my cheek. I took the brush that was on the dresser and threw it at the mirror. I was ashamed for what people wanted me to be, this different person. This wasn't me. I ignored the shattered glass that lay on the floor, and I sprinted to my closet in search of a new outfit. I collected a pair of jeans which were ripped at the knee, a t-shirt, and a pair of shoes. They were simple, contrasting colors that made me feel so good. I lowered myself on the ground to grab a fragment of glass off the floor. I looked at myself in this piece of broken mirror and was satisfied with who was staring back at me, the genuine me who I'm not ashamed of. I unlatched the door and walked down the squeaky stairs to find my grandmother looking at me with disappointment. She said, "Haley, sit down." I slouched on a chilly black leather seat and I sat in silence for a couple of minutes, clueless to who was going to start the conversation. We didn't go to the party that evening, but a long conversation was held with endless questions. Why do you dress this way? Do you like girls? Do you like boys? I answered her questions politely, even though it irritated me. It's not her fault she was so curious. Trust me, I would have been too. But I guess I learned I am what I am. I am beautiful, I am unique, I am me.
Thank you, Haley. Reading our last story of the day, I'd like to now invite Gianna Palermo reading Angel of Mine.
Gee, wake up. Gee, wake up. I tossed and turned. I gradually opened my eyes to find my father hovering over my bed. I was confused. Is it time for school? The glowing red numbers on my cable box read 11:28. Distress filled my father's face. He said in a low, mournful voice, "Get dressed. Something happened to your sister. I'm driving you to your mom's." I immediately jumped out of bed and was out the door in seconds. In the car, it was silent throughout the ride, until we pulled up to my mom's apartment. It was a chaos of lights, sirens, and vehicles. Suddenly, the pit in my stomach dropped to my feet. What ifs tore through my mind. I didn't know what happened. All I knew that it was something bad. Images and scenes played in my head as I stared up at the towering apartment building that I called home. I was not ready for what I was about to encounter. Before we went upstairs, my aunt stopped me. Listen, G, don't talk to anyone, just go straight to your mother. Thoughts flooded my brain. My mother was at the kitchen table in the same seat she always sits in, next to the window that faced the alleyway. She stared down at the table, her eyes were puffy and red. G, there was a long pause, then she continued. I just want you to know that this is nobody's fault. I stared at her, my face blank. I didn't know what to say or how to feel. My mother grabbed my hand as these mind-boggling words came out of her mouth. Mia passed away today. Her voice cracked as she said it. I was in shock. Tears started running down my face like raindrops rolling down a window. When my mom saw me cry, her heart began to ache. I just sat in silence, staring down at the dark tile floor as my heart grew heavy. I never thought I'd ever hear those words being said to me. Watching my mom break down like this broke me even more. My sister and I were sent with my aunt to give my mom some space. My sister was only 2 at the time, and she didn't know what was going on, but I, on the other hand, was 12, and I unfortunately understood everything. I was young, but I knew I had to be strong for my mom and my sister. The funeral took place a week after my sister's death. It was by far the hardest day of my life. The tears racing down my face as I walked into the funeral home. I knew this was the last time to say my goodbyes. I watched slideshows of all the great memories we had as a family, and I knew I'd never get those back. I will always remember her as a happy baby, her beautiful eyes and a great big smile that would light up the room. Everyone around me was sobbing, and I felt overwhelmed with grief. Her casket remained closed until the end of the service. At the end, it was open for whoever wanted to say their goodbyes. As this emotional day came to an end and everyone cleared the room, my mom pulled me to the side. Maybe it's best you don't see her. Instead, remember her as a happy baby she once was. I understood, but I didn't care. I wanted to see her one last time. I sat on the couch outside the room and stared down while tears smacked the carpet floor. My mom knew I wanted to see my sister one last time, so she told me that we could go see her together. When it was our time to approach the casket, knots arose in my stomach. Going up to her casket and seeing her how she was crushed me. This didn't seem fair, how a happy soul like hers didn't get to live her life. My mom and I both prayed and said our goodbyes as we closed the casket together. That was the last time I'd ever see her again. My mom held me tight as we grieved. That day and that moment made it clear to me that it was real and it was goodbye. I never thought something like this could happen, but this made me cherish everyone I love around me because you never know what could happen at any moment. I knew that everything I do in life would be for her since she didn't get a chance to chase her dreams. I know that no matter what I do or where I go in life, my sister will always be watching over me. God has gained another angel, my angel.
Thank you, Kianna. I would now like to invite up Jamira Davenport, accompanied by Edward Lepre, singing I Am Me.
I'm me, and that's all I can be. I'm me, here's my vulnerability. I'm free, and you can't stop me. I'm free, and that's all I can be. Days pass, I'm trying to find who I really am. People don't like the way I dress, so if I'm mad, I dye my hair, and it's not just vanity. Your validation is just not that important to me. I'm me, and that's all I can be. I'm me, it's my vulnerability. I'm free, and I find it here I am in peace, making friends with spirits lost, and it sets me free. Expressing myself, 'cause it's my liberty. Your validation is just not that important to me. Oh, I'm me, and that's all I can be. I'm me, it's my vulnerability. I'm free, and you can't stop me. I'm free, and that's all I can be. I am me, I am me, I am me. I am free, I am free, I am free. I am me, I am me, I am me. I am free, I am free. I am me, I am me, I am me. I am free, I am free, I am free. I am me, I am me, I am me. I am free, I am free. Read yourself, redo yourself, renew yourself. Be you, do what you do. Hold your head up high, everything is gonna be alright. You're you, I am me, and let's live in harmony. Coexist with each other, love each other, be yourself. You have to be yourself, be real, be honest. 'Cause ain't nobody got time for that. They really don't. So listen to me, listen to this song. Thank you.
Thank you, Demir and Edward. Beautiful song. I would now like to just thank our Board of Education, our administration, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Fitzhugh, Ms. Pick, Mrs. Gullo, our brilliant English teachers, Mr. Apicella, Mr. Barfield, Mr. Huggins, and Ms. Troutman, and also Mrs. Hack for coming back today. I'm sorry. Without you guys, none of this would have come true. Congratulations to all you for becoming published authors. Also, a special thank you to Mr. Stasiak, Mrs. McGreevy, Chef Nelson, and Edward Lepre for helping put this all together. Lastly, I would just like to say we welcome you to join us in room 106, where we will be giving out everyone a copy of Behind the Veil, and there will be some light refreshments prepared by the culinary arts students. Thank you.